So, as we go back to that, to the first of chapter 17, I think there's just some real big questions that start coming to my mind. Let me get back there with my passage, and let's see. Let's start. Well, the first question that comes to my mind, right in verse 1, says the Philistines gathered together their armies in battle. They were gathered at Sukkah, which belonged to Judah, and they were encamped between Sukkah and Azekah in Ephes Damim. I'm not sure. I don't know if I don't have any idea if I pronounced that correctly. But anyway, if we set the stage for this thing, here we've got these two armies gathered together, and they're gathered for a purpose, for battle, right? But it's a real big question to me that it appears that they're gathered for battle, but I don't understand, and some of y'all may understand a lot better, but I don't understand how we've got these two armies, and they're gathered for battle. David is being sent by his father back and forth to these. We've got this huge giant who comes forth 40 days in a row, making accusations, and how do you have a war? How are you having a war and you've got this guy who's really coming out in this? It's a war different from what I would understand. I'm not, I've never been a warrior. I've never been engaged in a battle, but when the lives are being threatened, when lives are probably being taken in a battle, how do you have this time when you have a performance, if you will? One guy coming out and making these accusations toward the other, and for 40 days in a row, and you've got, for what it appears to me, you've got the Israelites being so intimidated by this one individual that it sounds like they're almost quivering in their boots. None of these brothers, none of the other soldiers has the fortitude to be willing to go out and address this guy and be his opponent. So anyway, those are just, as I'm saying some things, I want us to kind of talk about those little. What are your thoughts about there being 40 days that this guy, which we know that's a time of testing. I mean, we know there's a lot of things that it's big stuff. Yes, sir.
I just want to know if when I read this last night, I thought, is this the two mountains that one of them was cursed and the other one was blessed? Is that the same two mountains or not?
Gerizim and
the ones were in a valley, so I don't know.
The mountain was cursed was Ebal.
and then Gerizim.
It's the mountain, but they were between Sukkah. Now we know that Sukkah, that's where when the Israelites first entered the land, that's where they entered in.
So it probably would be. It probably would be, because then that was one of the first things they did, was they split up, went to Gerizim and Ebal.
So if that's the case,
They're not the same,
Okay.
though?
No, this is
No.
further south.
Okay.
further south.
Ebal and Gerizim are in the northern, in the land of Israel, as opposed to the land of Judah.
Yeah, and wasn't Shechem between the two mountains?
I don't know about the mountains issue, but the way that the battle was being waged was actually kind of common practice, because what sense did it make to actually go win a battle and you only had 5 people left? And that was kind of what a lot of these guys saw, especially in some of their big wars, that they were losing. They were killing the other side, they were killing their enemies, but they were left completely annihilated. And that's why champions was a common way of fighting war, and what it was a promise for, okay, if your champion wins, we surrender. My champion wins, you surrender. And so it's very, it was more practical than sending an entire army. But it also goes to, what if that had happened in World War II? Instead of the nation being you know, or look at that time span where, I mean, we had baby boom and all that kind of stuff and blah, 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 but we also lost, how many people? You know what I mean, in one battle, so.
One of the things that I tell you, go ahead, Jay.
We kind of do a lot of this anyway, doing the same thing, but in a sports environment. You take college team versus college team, and they turn around, they take their best players and they play their football or whatever. It could be a state against a state. Or we could do Olympics, and where we do country against country. All this is doing is setting a stage that I'm bigger than you, and it's there to intimidate you. There will come a time, even the war part, that those men that will not be slaves will be served, will have to be killed on that. So there's still probably a war, but the whole thing was an intimidation factor on this, trying to show how much bigger and powerful, because I'm fixing to come in and clean your clock type of thing.
Even the accusations when even after David went out to face him, and there was a lot of talk going on, because both of them reported to one another, I'm gonna take your flesh and I'm gonna feed it to the birds and the beasts. And so they both stated that to one another. So we know there was a lot of this rhetoric. And because there was a lot of rhetoric, it makes me think, I don't know if I'm correct on this, but that makes me think that it was even a negotiation type of a situation that we have inherited. So when we have Cold Wars and we have our high political people go and have a conference with another nation, we're basically coming against one another. That the ultimate end of that could be a war, but we're kind of hoping to avoid it. Now, I think there were a lot of soldiers on the Israel side for sure, probably some on the Philistine side that really would have preferred for that war to be resolved with, like you said, is that alternate method. Now,
even after Goliath was killed on this,
It went after him.
there was a war.
yeah,
Which is a real good point, because what it does is sometimes we have a tendency to think that because David killed Goliath, that the battle was over, that the Israelites won. What it did was it put them in the position that it put the fear of God into the Philistines, and it made them retreating. And so then it gave it a huge advantage to the Israelites, but the war wasn't over. They still had something they had to accomplish. Yes.
Jay gave me some Ray Vander tips. And Ray's the one that's been taught me the difference between Eastern thought and Western thought.
Okay.
This story is his example of Eastern and Western thought. Look at the picture of Goliath. In Western thought, if we were a writer, would we have put down the description that he puts down in this story?
he would be huge, he would be awesome, he would be...
Maybe the color of his hair, the color of his eyes. No, he's 6 cubits tall. His shield or spear weighs
600 shekels.
600 shekels.
15 pounds.
Well, but if you get into ancient measurements, and this is kind of controversial Jewish thought, and Ray goes into that, it's 6 kilos or something like that, or 6. And he has a scaly breastplate. The man looks like a snake, and his number is 666. He is the antithesis of God.
Okay, the 666 number, you're coming from the weight, from the breastplate, from the. I'm
painting a picture.
6
Yeah,
cubits.
I'm asking you to draw it a little more clearer for us.
Well,
So I'm painting a picture here, so the number, go ahead.
what he's trying to do is, with this description, is to say this is the evil, the dark, the ugly,
The most evil of man.
is what he's showing in Eastern thinking.
And
Yes,
then
exactly.
that's the picture of the Antichrist given in Revelations. His number will be
Well,
666. So, we have a picture of the most God hater there is. 40 days coming out blasphemy, the most holy one, testing. And we see a shepherd's son, a small little fella who, unassuming, we're like, there's no way. Yeshua, when they thought, no way. Poor shepherd. So it's a perfect picture of how God can do all things. And he will conquer, even though in man's eye, it
Yeah.
looks undefensible.
And which is that big picture, then as we go back to a subplot, and we're gonna get down here in a minute, so David's whole attitude towards that evil, the ultimate evil, he who is boasting against, criticizing, God, what's his attitude, you know?
That kind of brings up a point that we really need to put in our life, and that's really what we're trying to do with some of this. David being a young boy, young compared to a hardened warrior, and yet he had the faith, he had the understanding, the relationship with Yahweh, that it didn't matter what he was going up against. He knew it, he had the faith that God's going to fight this battle for him through him.
Yeah.
And there was no doubt, there was no worry. It was, and yet here Goliath is telling him just, you're unworthy, you're not any good, you're all this, and it's like, I got Big Daddy with me. You may not see him, but you're in a world of hurt now. And there it was. We need to get that in our life. That is so hard to do, whether it be something in business, something in life, something in health, whatever. I mean, we need that. Here's Jamie's one of the sweetest and best examples of that. Just, somebody that is always loving and caring and just as sweet as could be, and yet so limited, but yet so wonderful. Great example.
Jim, say again the 666, what was the first one?
He was
Represented by?
6 cubits tall,
Oh.
and he had 600 shekels, and then the other was,
His shield was
his
also
shield, if you get into certain translations, is 60, I believe. But he also has
breastplate.
his breastplate is made up of scales. Which animal has scales? A snake, a serpent. So the picture here is, it's the devil himself.
Right. Well, looking at it from David's perspective in a little bit of a different light, we see this older man who has got weighted down with all of this armor, and so he's going to be slow. David's young, he's nimble, he's on his feet, and he's used to throwing this sling. And what he's got here is this large man who, I think they say 10 foot 8 inches or so, I think just short of 11. He's got a larger target, and so, but he's got the faith of a young man who when you're young and oftentimes immature, you have the, you don't know that you.
I think what you're describing is the physical way that we look at things. But the fact is, that's not at all the way David was looking at it. David was bold, he was confident, but he had a reason for his confidence, and it had nothing to do with size, it had nothing to do with his speed, it had to do with the fact that he knew God was in control, and he had built the confidence because God had given him the power previously to kill a bear and a lion. So he had some record, but even in those things, he said, God has empowered me to do this. And so I think that we really need to really focus. I think it's extremely important that we focus on the fact that he knew his power and his ability to take on, him was absolutely from God and not from
Yeah,
himself.
I don't mean to take away from that,
Okay.
certainly, it's just that to use it practically in our own lives, you know, to have faith in, that, you know, that it is possible to go out and do those things with faith. Most people are too afraid, though, to go out, you know.
But I think it's so important because we always look to our own abilities and to compare ourselves based upon our own abilities rather than on God's power. And what he did that removes himself from that fleshly thinking and the way that I want to do things of my flesh is to say, well, what tools have I got to do to accomplish whatever task it is before me?
That's one of the things I thought was interesting, that he did, you know, ascribe that to God and did not take,
Right. Another thing that's quite interesting to us that I think we need to kind of even question as we're looking at this story, there were a lot of opinions about this. He went to his brothers, and his brothers, he said, why doesn't somebody go up against, again, we'll go back to what we discussed earlier, the circumcision becomes important. As he goes back, how come somebody's not willing to go against this uncircumcised Philistine, that this 666, a representative of evil? Well, why would we be afraid of this evil? Then, we've got God's on our side. He's uncircumcised. We're circumcised people. We're God's people. He's not.
Did you catch last night when Alan was talking about the 5 stones taken from the water, that they were rounded and smooth and it represented circumcision?
You should have been there, Jim.
I should have been there.
And so that was
Didn't know about it.
that's what the stones represented. I guess the 5 would represent maybe the same thing as
Well,
the 5 stones.
The other thing too, they're for his other brothers. Yeah, it's for the other 4 brothers that were coming.
Well, I've heard that, but I mean, really, I assume that was, what evidence do we have? Oh, okay.
But
So
Well,
I think that attests to his faith. He thought, not only am I gonna get Goliath, but his brothers are probably gonna come after me, and so I'll get each one of them too.
Well, again, the battle's really not gonna be over, only when God delivers him into my hand. That's not gonna be the whole battle. And, yeah, in fact, this is, I've been confused all day. I've had a thing of,
Had some fun
I've
times
had,
this morning.
yeah, the enemy's been around. Anyway, so I've got there's a lot of different thoughts that I have, and I'm having a difficult time keeping things in sequence and keeping my thoughts organized. Yes.
Is when it says he's 6 cubits high, is a cubit a foot and a half?
I don't know.
It's a rough estimate.
He's a tall boy.
He was about 9'6".
Say it's supposed to be from your,
I think
elbow.
that's what I've understood.
That's,
Yeah,
That's what I've understood is only from things, like other
He was a big boy.
people's, I don't convert measurements. I struggle with, just metric system, much less you get into biblical terminology.
They say that down, it was from your elbow to the end of your hand. Of course, there's 2 different measurements. One is from your elbow to your
People
wrist.
used to be a lot taller and their bones were a lot bigger.
Okay, and this is the problem we have with Western thought. What difference does it make how tall he is? It doesn't. The story is, this guy is the Antichrist. It doesn't matter if he's 6 inches tall, 60 feet tall, which we in our Western mind, we want to go, well, how tall is this boy?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Well, I was just curious, because like,
Because I understand it, but that's because of our Western mindset and the way we've been trained. And all I'm saying is, in this story, it doesn't, 9 feet has nothing to do with the story. It's just trying to tell you, he is the antithesis of evil. He is evil.
If I remember what you were saying earlier about Eastern and Western,
Yeah,
Eastern is concrete, it's rock.
right.
Western is ethereal. If we're trying to get a measurement, is that ethereal? I'm
Right,
having trouble figuring.
But we're thinking in Western measurement.
Right.
You gotta go back to cubits. So just understand, it doesn't matter how big a cubit is.
Not,
You see that he is 6'6".
of course, you can look at it both ways, spiritual and physical. It's still a challenge that he went out physically.
He is a big man. Yeah, he is a big man. And we wanna wrap our head, well, how big is big?
Well,
But
here's
that's-
another question, when
but-
you say numbers aren't important, then why would the number, why would it even say that? Why would it even say that?
I'm just painting a picture.
Well, what he's trying to say is, you're saying numbers aren't important. What we're saying is the measurement of that, whether it be an inch, a metric, millimeter, or a cubic, or what, does not matter. That's what he was in reference to.
Oh, okay.
I'm telling you the character of the man. The picture paints the character of the man, and that's all, that's why you see measurements.
In the Hebraic concept, if the story was trying to portray this was evil, this is dark, this is, and not, it's.
How tall he was.
Why, who
Okay.
cared how big his spear is, but the description, as we would think of it, it is real shiny, it's real pointy, it's real this. They are saying it's 6.
If
They're
it's,
saying it's evil.
if his height is, if his height, like we needed to know, 9 point how many inches was important, then we would also have seen, well, David was 5 feet 2 inches.
Or he was,
And it doesn't tell us anything like that about David. That's irrelevant to the story. It's just,
David would have been classified as 7.
Let's give him a 10.
And,
Yeah.
no, a 10 is the direction we would look. 7 is God's number being
Yeah.
perfect or, complete.
Alright, I was just curious, cause I didn't come to
Right.
what was
So I'm just trying
say.
so as you read this, don't be caught up in the thing, well, how big, how tall is all this? Just look at the painted picture that you see here.
What Jim's trying to say is that the difference, and the big difference between Greek thought and the
American
Eastern,
thought.
and, well, no, Greek is American thought. We
Oh,
think
yeah.
in Greek, and the Eastern thought is they think in circular terms,
Okay.
picture language. The Greeks have taught us, books and very ideological, abstract things. But they really, they always talked in pictures, and they drew pictures, and so that's.
Well, the case in point, the way he described it is if somebody's been, like in China, educated in China, Japan, or the Philippines, and if somebody's been, in Greek thought, in the United States or in Europe, they gave them an assignment, and it always comes out the same way. Tell me what your company is going to be, or your life's going to be in so many years. The Western thought will come back to the list. Well, I plan to do this, I plan to do this, I plan to blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
The Eastern thought will come back and here's a picture. They have painted a photo. That's the difference.
Okay.
Okay, I want to ask another question about this thing about why would David be resisted to go against Goliath, or why would he even have a concept that would be okay for him to be the representative of the nation against this giant? We're gonna have a contest. The winner's gonna be winner take all, and so for our group, we're gonna find, our opponent is,
Skilled,
skillful, mastered, extremely, scary to all of us. And we're gonna allow a young, inexperienced guy, because he's confident, to go against him. I mean, I'm just talking again in fleshly thought. His brothers said, his brothers scoffed at him. The other soldiers scoffed at him. He goes to the king, but the king hears about it, and so the king talks to him, and the king asks him why he thinks, and so the king reminds him that this man is skillful, and the king reminds him that he's just a lad, but then he has to convince the king. So when we're talking about practical things, how did he convince the king? Why did Saul change his mind and say, okay, we're going to allow you, young man, to represent all of us against this superimposing guy that scares us to death?
Well, David wasn't gonna let that Philistine talk bad about his God.
That's right, but that's not why, and that's correct, but that's not, I mean, you
Well, he
know,
had a track record.
he did have a track record, and that gave him confidence.
Well, I mean, that's basically all he had to give to the king was like, well, I've killed bear, I've killed a lion, you know, I mean, and I can,
Okay, let me rephrase, let me ask you this,
Okay.
this way. DJ is a young guy who's got a lot of confidence about a lot of things, and many of them rightly so, he's accomplished some things. But if I'm the guy in authority and he comes to me telling me this skill level, I'm probably not gonna trust him, just because of his skill level. I'm gonna probably be very suspicious that he can really perform to the level that he tells me he thinks he can. Yes, Jay?
What did Saul have to lose?
And
first of all, this was the only guy that was willing to go out there.
but still, just because a guy's willing, I'm not gonna trust my fate.
Well, put it this way, people told him that there was somebody that was making these claims that they would go out.
Right.
So he did put him, he said, okay, bring him to me. And obviously there's got to at least be some element of saying, looking him in the eye and seeing his honest level of commitment, saying, okay,
My God.
you're telling me you did this and this, but I'm going to still have to get my impression.
Before we get to the end of the answer, let me throw out another
Okay.
question. Now let's go back in the timeline. What Western thought? Because I can't escape it. How do we, on a timeline, did Saul know David prior to that time? What about, as he had sent for him, as he had played the harp for, so let's discuss that for a minute.
That was very interesting because he said that the evil spirit came upon him and David would remove that evil spirit as he played the harp.
Well,
So-
but I'm always confused that it was after the battle, that day, when they did the battle, and they went, and so David is all fighting, and Goliath is done dead, and it talks about how Saul goes, hey Abner, do you know who this kid is? And he's like, I don't know who he is, is that not, so
No.
you wouldn't have known him, right?
I think that's,
It's in chapter 16.
earlier on,
Yeah.
he had already had an evil spirit come
Yeah.
upon him that David had seen. So I think this is the reason that it's kind of important. In fact, I did do a little search on someone else's chronology of David's life, because this to me was an interesting thing. So that, I don't think that, and this one that I read even says this is his suggested chronology, and he says it's by no means definitive. So he's got some wide ranges in some of these things, but first he starts off with from 1040 BC that Saul was the roughly the time that Saul reigned as king over Israel. And about 1035 BC is likely the time of David's birth. Okay, so that would have made him born about 5 years after Saul began to reign. And at 1030 BC, Jonathan was when Jonathan was a mighty warrior and God anointed him, and he went out and he made his own conqueror over the Philistines. And that's in 1 Samuel chapters 13 and 14. And then at about 1025 BC, that's when David is anointed by Samuel in 1 Samuel 16, and David is about 10 to 13 years old approximately, if this timeline is correct. And so obviously we don't know how much, we don't know when Saul found out about David's anointing, but